Alright. Hey guys, this is Flamestone, and I just want to do a quick little deck tech on my Izzet Control deck for Arena Pauper right now. I just finished up a 5-0 run on the little Pauper League, so I'm kind of proud of the deck because it's gone through a few iterations, so I thought I'd just do a quick little deck tech on it. So the first thing you need to know about the deck is that it's an Izzet Control deck. It's very similar to control decks of Standard, like Dimir Control, Esper Control, Azorius Control, etc. With the one big difference of, obviously it's Pauper, and obviously it's Izzet, but the most important one is that there's no big win condition. The most expensive card in your deck is Hieroglyphic Illuminations and Flame Lash, which are two important cards in the late game, but they're not exactly big win conditions. A lot of time when you see big control decks in blue, you'll find that the big win condition is, if I can get to it, should probably put it at common. The big win condition tends to be one of the big serpents. For Death Serpent, River Serpent, Gear Seeker Serpent, or most of the time, Stripped Riverwinder. Is usually the big win condition because it's a big 5/5 with hexproof. It beats a lot of other stuff in the format, and so usually that's the big win condition. And you know, if they don't need it, they just cycle it, which is a good idea, but that's not exactly the idea of my deck. In my deck, your win condition is a playset of Firebrand Archers, and that's important to know just in how you play the deck, right? You're not constantly controlling the board until you get to your big creature. Drop your big creature, and then you just keep swinging with your big creature until your opponent runs out of life or they concede. You win with Firebrand Archer and miscellaneous burn spells going at the face like Shock and Flame Lash. So what you have to do with the deck is kind of play it a little bit differently, right? Turn 2, you might want to hold up Essence Scatter to control the board, but maybe you're better off playing Firebrand Archer so that next turn you can Essence Scatter and get the ping with Firebrand Archer. It's kind of the idea of the deck. So that's kind of talking about the most important card of the deck, Firebrand Archer, which pings your opponent for 1 each time you cast a spell, which you're going to cast a lot of because that's the majority of your deck. But also a thing to note is its power and toughness. Being a 2/1, it's really easy to kill, and it's kind of tricky to defend in the deck because all you really have are your counter spells in the form of Syncopate and Cancel, which is not ideal. But because the power is 2, you can swing with Firebrand Archer if you do a good job of clearing the board. That gives you room to swing with Firebrand Archer, and that's going to be where a lot of your damage comes from, is your Firebrand Archer's triggers, and also swinging with it. After that, the second most important card of the deck, which is kind of in the same vein, is Seeker of Insight, a 2-mana 1/3. Its power and toughness is really relevant because there are a lot of cards in the format that are 1/1s, which Seeker of Insight blocks really well. 2/1s, like Rat Colony. If one of the meanest things you can do is if your opponent swings with 2 3/1s, you kill one of the 3/1s and block the other one with Seeker of Insight. It's really the good feeling to do. But yeah, one of the big important things about its ability, its looting ability. So even though it's only if you cast a non-creature spell this turn, what you'll find is that because the majority of your deck is spells, that happens a lot of the time. That you get the Seeker of Insight trigger to be able to loot, which is really nice and convenient because Seeker of Insight helps you find a lot of the cards in your deck that you'll need in a specific situation, like a Flame Lash to deal with a big creature, or a Dual Shot, which is in here for a very specific reason, which we'll get over in a second. So those are your two big main creatures. There's one other creature in the deck, which is Scribe the Mindful, but we'll get over that in a second. So, kind of going up from the mana curve, your first card is Opt. Opt is a very good card just like in general, but specifically in the deck what it does is it allows you to continue kind of like in the same vein as Seeker of Insight. Look for cards in your deck that you need to, you know, keep controlling or, you know, maybe finishing the game out if your opponent's only at like 2 HP and you're trying to find a shock to win the game. So Opt does a really good job of digging for cards you need, and it also turns on your Seeker of Insight and your Firebrand Archer so that they can trigger their abilities. After that, you have Dual Shot. Dual Shot is not a card I like in the deck. It doesn't perform particularly well, but it's important in the deck because it's a good way of dealing with the Rat Colony deck, which this deck struggles with. This deck struggles a lot with Rat Colony, but it's able to mitigate its struggle against Rat Colony just with like a Dual Shot or a Blazing Volley. honestly, I kind of go back and forth on whether I should run Dual Shot or Blazing Volley. Dual Shot's nice because it's at instant speed, but Blazing Volley hits everything. And I just constantly go back and forth on whether which one I want to use. Right now it's at Dual Shot because you don't run into a lot of Rat Colony decks, so the instant speed is a bit nicer when playing against decks that don't swarm the board as fast as Rat Colony. If there ever gets to a point where you can play Pauper as best 2 out of 3, Dual Shot would hopefully just go on the sideboard, and then you would have 4 of them in the sideboard just to deal with Rat Colony. But alas, it is not, so it's in the main board. It also is really good with Scribe of the Mindful, which we'll go over when we get to Scribe of the Mindful. After that, we have Shock, which is by far the best card in the format. 1 mana, deal 2 damage to any target is great. It kills most of the creatures in the format, specifically the smaller ones, and you can also aim it at face if you're just trying to get 2 extra damage for lethal, or if you're just trying to turn on Seeker of Insight or Firebrand Archer, because Shock is kind of like a lightning bolt if you aim it at your face and while you have a Firebrand Archer on the field, because then you're dealing 3 damage for 1 mana at instant speed, which is really nice. Shivan Fire is kind of just a discount Shock. What I found is that with the 1 mana burn spells that deal 2 damage, you kind of want 5 or sometimes 6, depending on how you want it. You want 4 Shocks because that's the best card in the deck, but it's kind of a toss-up between Shivan Fire or Magma Spray. It really doesn't matter. I've never really, there was one game where I had Magma Spray that was really important, which was against this white deck, this white and Balm deck, weirdly enough, but Magma Spray tends to not, that's pretty much all it does, is it hits some Embalm stuff. So I like Shivan Fire a bit better because Magma Spray only hits Embalm stuff. But definitely you want 4 Shock, and then after that you can choose between if you want 1 or 2 Shivan Flame or Magma Spray. So you can go 4 Shock, 1 Shivan Flame, 4 Shock, 1 Magma Spray, or 4 Shock, 2 Shivan Fire, 4 Shock, 2 Magma Spray, or 4 Shock, 1 Shivan Fire, and 1 Magma Spray. It's really up to you. You can kind of just decide for yourself what you really run into more. After that, we have Essence Scatter, which is another big card in the deck. Essence Scatter does, it's a really nice curve card. You don't really have any big 4 mana plays except for Flame Draft, Flame Lash, and Hieroglyphic Illuminations. And by the time you get to your 4th mana, you generally don't want to just be Flame Lashing or Hieroglyphic Illuminations. You want to be doing something else. So specifically at 4 mana, you can go Firebrand Archer and then Essence Scatter. Essence Scatter just on its own, you really can't win with alternate win conditions. In Pauper, you kind of have to win with creatures. Or, you can win with Sunburn, but most of the time it's going to be with creatures. So Essence Scatter deals with most win conditions in the game, which is makes it a very powerful card, especially for 2 mana, counter target, if we go back, counter target 7 mana Striped Riverwinder. It's really powerful, just getting that card off the board. The creatures we went over. Cancel is another big one. It's Disallow is a great card in Standard, and Cancel is just like a discount Disallow. It deals with anything you need it to. The double blue gets tricky a lot of times. It's the only card in the deck that doesn't have a single mana cost on it. But, Cancel's just deals with, any problem you need. So because of that, it's really nice. Then we have a 2 of Divination. So if we kind of look over the things, you kind of have 3 mana for most of 3 for most of these. Dual Shot I have on 2 because it doesn't do a lot in your deck unless you're playing against Rat Colony, but if you only have 1, it's too unpredictable to deal with Rat Colony, so I have it at 2. And, your deck's pretty good at finding it anyway, so... And Dual Shot also comes up in other matches. Everything else kind of tends to be at 3, just because, I don't know, I like playing cards at 3. I know maybe I should be running another Seeker of Insight or another Cancel and go down Shivan Fire and something else, but I like 3 at most of these. Divination specifically at 2 because it's not a very good card draw engine. You much rather be, if you had the choice, you would probably be running 6 Hieroglyphic Illuminations, but I have 2 Divination just because you kind of need the card draw. One of the biggest challenges playing Control in Pauper is that you don't get a ton of great card draw engines. For example, Glimmer of Genius is probably one of the best ones in the game, but you don't get access to that because was printed out in Common, so you're forced to run cards like Hieroglyphic Illumination and also Divination. When it comes to card draw engines, you can decide to run other stuff. If you find that Tezzeret's Ambition is a better card, you can run Tezzeret's Ambition. There's a couple. Inspiration, you could also run. Actually, you probably don't run Inspiration, but what's the other one? There's another 3 mana one, I think. Or wasn't there like a 4-mana sorcery speed one? I think there was a 4-mana sorcery speed one. Whatever, doesn't matter. But Divination, I found it tends to be the best one besides Hieroglyphic Illumination. It's just a card draw engine. It also turns on Seeker of Insight and Firebrand Archer. Then we have Scribe of the Mindful. Scribe of the Mindful is probably one of the worst cards in my deck. If I had to cut a card, it would probably end up being Scribe of the Mindful. That's why it's only out of 2 of in the deck. But the thing that makes Scribe of the Mindful really powerful is that it's pretty much a Swiss Army knife of answers in the late game. So, you know, you're going through your game, you're shocking some stuff, you're countering some stuff, you know, maybe you Flame Lash something, maybe you get some card draw, and then you get to put down Scribe of the Mindful. By this point, you should probably have like 6 or 7 mana, so if you want to crack Scribe of the Mindful, it only costs 1 mana, so you 1 mana, crack Scribe of the Mindful, and then you get the answer that you need, whether that be a shock, a dual shot, a Flame Lash, a cancel, an Essence Scatter. It can basically find you anything you need. It also works really well with dual shot. If you have Scribe of the Mindful on the battlefield, you can if your opponent has 2 2/2s, you can dual shot the 2/2s, crack Scribe of the Mindful, get back dual shot, and then kill, and then dual shot again, which will kill both of them. So it does a really good job in that. You know, just like if all you have in your graveyard is a shock, you know, and your opponent's got a 4/4, you can shock, Scribe of the Mindful, shock again. It's just a really good Swiss Army knife of just whatever you need it to do. In the late game, it's also a good beatdown card, because your deck could use that. It's kind of just, it doesn't do any one thing really good, but it does a lot of things, which makes it really powerful. Hieroglyphic Illuminations is a good card draw engine. It's at instant speed, which is the big important reason why you're running it in your deck. It also cycles early game if you need to find something else. It's just a really good card draw engine, and if you don't need it, you can just cycle it. Unfortunately, cycling doesn't work with Firebrand Archer or Seeker of Insight. If it did, this card would be insane, but unfortunately it's not. But, you know, 4 mana draw 2 at instant speed is still very powerful, especially in Pauper. And also, as I said, has the cycling in case you don't need it. Flame Lash seems kind of weird in the deck. Unfortunately, Lightning Strike, while it is legal in regular Pauper, it's not legal in Arena Pauper, because if you look, it was only ever printed at Uncommon. It was printed at Uncommon in M19, and in Ixalan, it was also printed at Uncommon. So unfortunately, you can't run Lightning Strike, so your next best thing is Flame Lash. There's a lot of burn spells that are in the game that you can choose from. If we just kind of you know, after you get past, you know, Shocks, Shivan Fire's Magma Sprays, you kind of get to cards that are less than optimal. Chandra's Pyrohelix, not the greatest. Bombard, also not fun. Open Fire, you know, you get a ton of these Electrify. Flame Lash, I found to be the best, though. Bombard, sometimes you really need Flame Lash to go face, which is why I don't run Bombard or Electricity, and Open Fire just feels really bad. It feels really bad. So I just run a 3 of Flame Lash. It's also a really good win condition. If you have a Firebrand Archer on the battlefield, Flame Lash deals 5 damage face for 4 mana at instant speed, which is just a strictly better Lava Axe, which is really nice. So, yeah, and also Flame Lash deals with a lot of big creatures in the game. It's going to be, you know, once your opponent, you know, if you look at the burn spells in the deck, you kind of only really have Shock, Shivan Fire, and Dual Shot, which do 2 damage and 1 damage. So Flame Lash is really what you use to hit bigger creatures. And then lastly, we have Syncopate, which is just another counterspell in the deck, which your deck kinda needs, but you don't really need another negate, so you have Syncopate, which is a really good card. It counters pretty much anything you need it to in the early game, and then in the late game, when it's not really doing you too much, you can just loot it away with Seeker of Insight. After that, we go to the lands, which I have 23 of. It is a control deck, so you kind of want to be on the higher end of lands, but the reason why we're at 23 instead of 24, or, you know, a higher number like 25 or 26, is because your biggest card in your deck is Flame Lash and Hieroglyphic Illuminations, which is only 4 mana. So you don't need a ton of land in your deck, because, you know, your biggest spells are just answers and card draws. So you don't need a ton of land in your deck. You can really just kind of get away with 23. You could honestly probably go down if you wanted to. You could also go up if you really wanted to. You could drop the Highland Lakes for Evolving Wilds, or you could just drop them for basics altogether. The lands really aren't specific. You can kind of pick and choose how you want your lands to go. I like it at 23. I really like the spread of how it is right now. You kind of want more blue than red because, as I said before, cancels in your deck. But yeah, that's about it. Sideboard, there's no sideboard because it's Pauper. If you could, you would probably put a lot of dual shots and volley, blazing volleys in there. More, negates would be nice, but no sideboard, so it doesn't really matter. The biggest thing about Izzet Pauper, the losing matchups that Izzet Pauper has is, as I said, Rat Colony before, because a lot of your spells only go 1-1 with a Rat Colony. So, yeah, Scribe of the Mindfold trades. Seeker of Insight doesn't trade unless your opponent has 2 of them, and then it will trade. Firebrand Archer trades. Shock trades. Shivan Fire trades. Flame Lash trades. Cancel trades. Essence Scatter trades. All the cards trade except for Dual Shot, so it's really important that when you're playing against Pauper Rats that you find your Dual Shots, because your opponent will just outvalue you over time unless you get Dual Shots, which can 2-for-1 the Rats, which is honestly the best way how to win. The deck also struggles against the Inventor's deck. If you haven't seen, or the Artificer deck, the Inventor's Goggle deck, if you haven't seen that deck, it's really cool. I'm not entirely sure how to build it. I've seen a few different ways, but it's a really cool deck. If you want to look at Inventor's Goggles, 1 mana, equip creature gets 1/2. Whenever an Artificer enters the battlefield, you may equip it. This deck doesn't do very well against Inventor Goggles decks because it gives the creature +1/+2. So as you know, even if the creature only has 1 toughness, that gets it to the coveted 3 toughness, which your deck has a trouble dealing with because all you have is, Shivan Fire, Shocks, and stuff like that. So it struggles against that. One of the big things I've seen is there's this Brawler card. This card with Inventor's Goggle makes it a 4/5, which is nearly impossible to kill. You need to spend 2 burn spells on it. So the deck really struggles against the Inventor's deck because it can just make creatures with such high toughness. And it also struggles against the Rat Colony deck. And honestly, any deck that can really get a creature that has a lot of creatures with 3 toughness, because the deck doesn't run Open Fire or Bombard, which are kind of the best cards at dealing with creatures with 3 toughness, so you're kind of forced to spend a Flame Lash on it. When it comes... Oh, and the other thing it loses to is Striped Riverwinder, as I've showed you before. It's the really big creature with Hexproof. Once that card enters the battlefield, you kind of just have to concede, because the deck really has no way of dealing with a Hexproof creature. There are ways around it, though. Cancel deals with all of your problems. Essence Scatter deals with all of your problems as well. If your opponent plays a creature with 3 toughness, instead of trying to, shock and dual shot it, or double shock it, or kick Shivan Fire, if you just Essence Scatter or cancel it, it deals with it. And same with the Inventor's deck. If, you just Essence Scatter or cancel it, same thing with the Striped Riverwinder, that's kind of how you have to deal with it. But yeah, that's kind of it for the Izzet Pauper deck, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.